Have you ever walked into a workplace and just felt the atmosphere shift? Maybe it felt warm, welcoming, supportive, or maybe it felt tense, negative, and chaotic. Now, whether we realize it or not, workplace culture shapes everything, including how we approach behavior management. A positive organizational culture can empower caregivers, reduce behaviors that challenge, and create environments where both staff and those they support thrive. But a negative or inconsistent culture that can lead to frustration, burnout, and even reinforce the very behaviors that we're trying to manage. Today, we're diving into the impact of organizational culture on behavior management and support, how the way a workplace operates affects the people within it, how we can create a culture that promotes positive outcomes for all. If you are caring for someone else, whether paid or unpaid, and no matter how many hours you do it, did you realise that you may be missing out on thousands of pounds of discounts for things that you may use every day? The Able to Care podcast is proud to be sponsored by the UK's #1 carers card. Started by two best friends who recognise that carers deserve better and are 100% committed to helping to change the lives of all carers and bringing them together as a strong community. Carers Card UK provides support, recognition and rewards. It offers reassurance by providing an ID card that helps access emergency information when needed, while also unlocking discounts, a wellbeing hub, a carers circle tool and a community through their app. All of this for less than the price of a box of chocolates a year. There are discounts on gym membership, days out, electrical goods, clothing and even glasses. Let others know you care while taking a little care of yourself with an ID card you can be proud of. Visit carerscarduk.co.uk/promo code/able to care today to order yours. Hello and welcome to the Able to Care podcast. I'm your host, Andy Baker, and we're going to be exploring the realities of caregiving, education, and behavior support. Today, we're exploring something that often goes unnoticed, but has massive impact on behavior and an entire organization, and that's workplace culture. Now, most people know what the term or have heard the term culture, but I'm just going to expand. My favorite definition for culture is a set of shared values, beliefs, attitudes, and etiquette belonging to an institution or group. Now, I know that's a bit of a mouthful, but the basic premise is that it's the way we do things here. Now, we are all multicultural in the fact that we belong to different cultures. That's a bit of a hierarchy. So a UK culture, and then it might be either an English, Welsh or Scottish culture, but then you'll also have a Northern, Southern culture, and then and you can slowly drill down into these lots of different cultures that we belong to. And even so much as we belong to multiple cultures, like the culture at the gym that I go to is different from when I'm at home, or the culture I have in a restaurant following certain social norms and etiquette are slightly different than when I'm at my own meal table. When we're looking at so what affects the culture, what it's going to be, it's not just about policies, leadership, or the wording in a mission statement. It's how people actually interact with each other. It's how problems are actually solved. And it's the values that are upheld every day. And people impact on those values. For those of you who may be foster parents, for instance, I often try and get this over to foster carers because sometimes there can be a resistance to changing in rules or changing in routine. But when most partners first start living together, massive differences have to change based on we've got a new person living as with now. The rules are going to have to be different. The culture is going to have to be different. And it becomes an amalgamation of the two different cultures. And there's a little bit of compromise, a little bit of adjustment, a little bit of boundary setting that has to occur for that to be able to work. When you then have a child of your own come in, everything's going to change because you've got now a new person with different needs, different experiences, different ways of seeing the world, and therefore the culture is going to change again. So cultures naturally change when any new person comes into it. But sometimes there can feel a real resistance to that change, that it's seen as but what we've been doing works, but what you do tomorrow might be even better. When we're looking at this is a way we do things here, it's really important to remember that that's not a positive or a negative statement. That's just a statement of fact. But tradition does not always equal good. Just because it's the way you have always done things doesn't mean it's going to work for you in the future or work for anybody else coming into the environment. It also doesn't mean it's a bad thing. We should abandon everything. We should be constantly analyzing, looking at, exploring, having conversations and discussing about what this culture should look like and how to get the best. So, as we've said, workplace culture is the way we do things around here. It's not about policies, but it's what actually happens in day-to-day interactions. So when we're looking at culture, there is a culture iceberg that on the top is kind of what we see on a day-to-day, but underneath that is made of prejudices, attitudes, rules, policies, hierarchy, expectations. Okay, there's so much that goes on underneath the surface of the water. It's shaped by leadership, shaped by attitudes of people in the environment, but it's also about communication strategies and styles. But even the physical environment itself can make a difference to the culture. A strong, positive culture promotes teamwork, resilience, and consistency. A weak and toxic culture is involved in blaming, tends to have a high staff turnover, stress, and inconsistent approaches. In my life as a trainer, for instance, I have visited hundreds and thousands of different individual environments, whether that be schools or care homes, agencies, local authorities. And sometimes I can get an immediate impact on the culture that I'm walking into. It's often dictated by the leadership down, makes a huge difference. That manager or senior or that first person I encounter, I can really see how they connect on a one-to-one or a personal, what the communication style's like, whether they see training as a value or just a cost. It has such an impact. From a training point of view, one of my most frustrating things is when a manager kind of says about, oh, we've got some staff running late. Is it okay if they just pop in? Or the manager themselves, they're in at the beginning and they're in at the end and they don't actually stay for the full session. Not realizing that non-verbal communication they just displayed there is indicating their perception of how important training is. Well, it's important you have to do it because you've got to tick the box. It's not important for me because I'm the manager. And it's such a shame. You don't realize the detriment you're having as far as the value of the training that's being done. It's being undermined just by that very simple action. And you can map that out to all sorts of different scenarios in how different people respond to behaviors, interact, communicate. Some of you will know that I have certain phrases that I think shouldn't be allowed, one of them being kicked off. But if the manager's still using kicked off, or when certain members of staff are using kicked off, nobody corrects it or nobody goes, hey, we don't use that term here, then that's slowly going to perpetuate through the system again a little bit. If we take, for instance, a positive or a negative environment, a care home where staff feel supported and valued will naturally foster a calmer environment than one where staff feel overworked, ignored, and undervalued. This is why my model related to behavior starts in the preventative level, which is all about that culture impacting on then how behavior is managed, how the staff are being resilient, how they're kind of addressing it. So how culture affects behavior for staff and those they support. For any staff or carers or anybody, a negative culture of blame, micromanagement, lack of support leads to high stress, blocked care, and burnout. Blocked care is where we lose empathy for the people who we're supporting. We shut down. Oh, it doesn't make a difference anyway. They don't do what I tell them to do anyway. If staff are criticized more than they're supported, they become defensive rather than reflective. They can't look at an incident report and go, hey, how can I learn from this? Because they're so scared they're going to go, this is just telling me that I'm not good enough. I'm messed up again. I'll just be told off. I'll just be criticized rather than mistakes being stepping stones to learning. It also creates inconsistencies, can cause confusion, frustration, and then reinforce behaviors that challenge. If caregivers are tense or rushed, individuals that they care for are going to act out in a response. So a child in a school with inconsistent responses from teachers will struggle with boundaries and expectations because the goalpost keeps shifting. The rule with them is different from the rule of them, and there's no consistency there. But that may come from the conversations not being had above. So for those receiving support, people are highly sensitive to their environment. So there's such a symbiotic relationship between a parent and a child, between a caregiver and the one they love. If I'm in a state of high stress, frustration, inconsistency, undervalued, then that's going to be felt by the individuals that I'm working with, caring for, and looking after. So it's got to kind of come from that good place as far as I need to be calm and in control and feeling like I've got autonomy and connection and accountability in everything that I'm doing. One of the things that sometimes happens is that we don't notice that negative culture, or we do, but we don't say anything to address it. It's a thing called pluralistic ignorance. Pluralistic ignorance, I don't think this feels right, but nobody else seems to be saying it's wrong, so I must be the one that's wrong. And the problem is that's a huge challenge. That's why whistleblowing sometimes doesn't happen and things like that. I use an example for this. Let's say that the fire alarm goes off, but I look over to some other people to see if they start leaving. And because they don't start leaving, I go, oh, maybe it's a drill and nobody told me because they're not going anywhere. But they're looking over to me going, oh, he's not moving. Maybe it's a drill and nobody told us. So nobody evacuates the building. That's pluralistic ignorance. Okay. The important thing is, I need to raise the flag. I need to be bold and courageous enough to say, hey, this isn't working. This isn't right. So, potential signs of a negative culture. If you hear an awful lot of blaming, individuals not accepting responsibility for problems, they just become defensive, or they redirect it, or they lash out at other people, or they belittle and minimize. Some of the stuff that I talk about in my book, shame shielding, you can actually get from an awful lot of adults in toxic cultures. If there's a high staff turnover, people keep leaving, it's often a sign that something isn't working, whether it be for the management or whether it be the behavior management, or something about the environment is not working as a result of that. It could even be the hiring process, just it isn't working because maybe the values aren't ingrained into the hiring process. Lack of training and development. One of my main frustrations is that we should always be looking at a growth and development process. If you don't use something, you lose it. So when you're learning about new principles, new philosophies, new approaches, unfortunately, if it's not being reinforced, if it's not being encouraged, then it just gets lost. This is why we're still battling against old kind of behaviorist mentality as far as punishment reward in an awful lot of settings, because there isn't that constant ongoing reflection of learning this completely different way of managing behavior, more in the restorative kind of practice kind of route and the therapeutic models, because they're just not used enough, whereas society all the time is still reinforcing the behaviorist view. A culture of it's just the way we do things here. I've heard it all the time. Well, it's just the way we do things here. It's different here. The problem is, that doesn't work. We've tried that before. But they're talking about a different client at a different time on a different day. And just that resistance to any new ideas is always a really worrying sign that I hear. For a lot of places I go, if there is significant use of restrictive practices as well, this is always a major concern. Because sometimes it's not about the behavior of the individuals that are being restrained. It's sometimes about the behavior of the staff, the way they manage it, the way they're triggering it, the way they kind of feel the only option. Doesn't mean they're bad people. It means that something's not working in the culture. So how can we promote a positive culture in the environment? It's really important that when we are building any organization, or we're setting any standards for our home or for our care home or whatever it is, we're always leading with values, not just policies. We're looking to make sure we're aligning with what do we really want here? We want to promote. So my company is all about kind of improving positive outcomes for all. We want both caregivers to feel empowered and confident and encouraged and supported. And through the training that we do, we then want that to be passed on to the individuals they're supporting and caring for them to feel empowered, encouraged, valued. So it's got to start with everything we do. So within our office, within our organization, we try and make sure those same values across the board, we make it a habit in what we do. Open communication is massively important, both with, if it's staff or carers, with each other, but also with the individuals we're supporting and including. It's an environment that we're all kind of having to be in, whether that be our own home or whether it be a care environment. We've all got to kind of be there. So it needs to work for as many people as possible. There is always going to be, it's impossible to make everybody happy all the time, every day. But do people feel they at least have a say and some level of autonomy and choice within that process? make sure we're investing in training, mentoring, and well-being initiatives. It is so important. It's so undervalued. So many places get caught in the firefighting mentality rather than how can we build this from the bottom up? How do we make sure our foundations are absolutely solid? And that is through investing in the people that work there in whatever way that is. But we're investing in them, their well-being, their education, their growth should all be part and parcel. We want to make it so any staff working for you, my philosophy I heard from Richard Branson is you should be making sure that all of your staff could walk out and get any job they want. They're just treated well enough that they never want to leave. That is the ideal that we're looking for because we want the best staff we can possibly have, right? Well, that only happens through building them up. Try and promote consistency. And this is where having, again, conversations and discussions are really important. And whether it be two caregivers in a foster home, for instance, or whether it be two parents, I know it can be really difficult with like separated parents, but trying to communicate to get that consistency across the board rather than it's one rule here, one rule there, or this person lets me do this, but this person doesn't. Consistency is important across the board. It makes things so much easier for people to kind of cope with. Remember to recognize and celebrate any progress. Encourage individuals to notice positive change in anything. It's so easily done where we're always making notes of the negative. Unfortunately, society has kind of dictated that a little bit, that we're always commenting and writing and recording anything that goes wrong or anything we do badly or when something happens. And it's much harder, or people don't think to write down the good times, the positives, the little wins. So how are you promoting that within your organization? How are you promoting that in your own household? Are you celebrating and finishing the day with gratitude and a celebration of any little wins? Even from a personal basis, think through your day. What did you do that was nice or kind or respectful or thoughtful? And make sure you're catching those, reminding you that you're a good person. You've done good things. Try and move from blame to learning as well. It's so easy to throw blame and shade. Instead of criticizing mistakes, focus on what can be improved. How can we make that better? What can we learn through this experience? So this should always be, this is the importance of regular debriefs after instances. It's not about assigning blame, but to reflect and improve on what we could do differently next time. And that's both for maybe the individuals we're supporting, but definitely for ourselves as well. It also allows us to then feel more confident if situations occur in the future. So when we're looking at culture, if you feel uncomfortable, you should have, if we're a workplace, should have some level of whistleblowing process to kind of go, hey, things aren't working here. The culture isn't right. Some of you out there may be listening in your work night shift rather than day shift, and you might find the culture between those two is quite different. So are you narrating on that? For managers, are you sometimes sticking around in the evening at night to see what that night culture is like? How are they coping? How are they engaging with it? What works for them? Or have you got some way of gathering that information and details and opening those conversations up? We can also look even in our own home. Just because we think something's right, are we exploring it? Are we looking and using things like the Socratic method to kind of go, is this process, is this thought, is this thing I do based in facts and benefits of everybody here rather than, or is it based in prejudices and past beliefs and values that don't necessarily have any justification or validation to them? Workplace culture isn't just nice to have. It directly shapes how behaviors are managed and how staff and individuals feel in a setting. A negative culture can lead to stress, inconsistency, and reinforce behaviors that challenge. And whether that be you're visiting your mum who's now poorly, what's the culture in their house like? Well, how are you affecting that culture when you walk in? What's your attitude, your mentality, your way you'll be acting? If you're going in a bad mood, is that impacting the culture in that home? We all know how one grumpy person coming downstairs in the morning can completely change the atmosphere of your own home. Well, are you that grumpy person? Or are you getting into that state of? Now, that doesn't mean you need to be okay every day, but that's where you need to be okay to be honest and go, hey, I'm having a bit of a tough day. I'm not feeling at my best. So I'm really sorry if I snap. I'm really sorry if I'm a bit impatient. Just take it easy on me best you can. And being explicit about it then sets that stage to really go, get that. We all have those days. rather than necessarily impacting on the entire atmosphere. You might find that people rally around you and support you rather than then blame and shame. But on the flip side, try and make sure you're promoting that, fostering that nurturing of, hey, you seem to be struggling today. You seem to be a bit snappy. I'm just wondering if everything's okay. Are you having a tough day? That's all part of the culture of support, resilience, promoting well-being, empathy, all the stuff that I teach on behavior management and stuff like that. It shouldn't just be towards others. It should be towards ourselves. It should be towards our colleagues. It should be kind of ingrained habit within the culture itself. Remember that positive culture leads to teamwork, consistency, proactive approaches, whereas negative culture leads to stress and consistency. Change starts with leadership, open communication, and valuing staff development. We want better behavioral outcomes. We want better behavioral outcomes from our team, from the individual report. We have to create better environments. So if you work in care or education settings, take a moment to reflect. What's the culture like where you are? What's the culture been like within your home? Is it helping or is it hindering the people you support? Hopefully you found this useful. If you find anything useful, then please like, comment, and share. And don't forget, try and subscribe or follow if possible. Let me ask you a question. Do you ever find the pressures of supporting, teaching, or caring for someone else overwhelming and wish you had access to more support and information? The Able to Care podcast, in connection with Able Training, has created the ablehub.uk, where for less than the price of a coffee a week, you can access exclusive podcast content, resources, events, and over 45 certified online courses, covering topics like self-care, understanding dementia, neurodiversity, first aid, conflict management, financial advice, and so much more, with new content and courses being added each month. We are so confident that you will benefit from the Able Hub that we are offering 14 days access completely free of charge. No contract, cancel anytime. Become part of the ablehub.uk community and gain the support, knowledge, and resources you deserve. Don't struggle alone. Be able. Find the link in the description.